Okay, this is a new video following the launch of the permanently up playtest for Mirandus. So we're going to go over a few things. First is some big news that the dev team has just released, which is quite controversial, and we'll go into that in detail. The next I have some post-launch gameplay videos, a bunch of different ones kind of highlighting some cool things, and it should be noted that this launch initially only has a different version of the previous playtest, which is the Rolling Hills. Next month we're supposed to be receiving some of the new zones. Most likely it will be King's March at that point. Then we'll go into how the drops work in detail, and that's after killing about 10,000 enemies in this build as the present. After that we're going to show some videos showing what the new races work and how they're not actually the same. And then we'll show a bunch of different bugs via images and via videos, in addition to any timestamps related to this video. And then as usual, just finishing off with some final thoughts on what I think's happening, my general opinions, and how things are going to go forward. So here is the big news. So El Fernio, who's one of the people in the Mirandus team for the Chilean dev team, made an announcement, and he says, "Hey everyone, I was wondering, what do you think about Mirandus played this way?" Now, what you're going to see in the videos, if you haven't seen Mirandus up to this point, is that Mirandus is a first-person 3D MMORPG, and they're looking to change Mirandus into this isometric view, which essentially looks like a reskin of the Walking Dead Empires, which they're also building. And this is a big step down from the highly ambitious project that we've been kind of experiencing up to this point. And the current dev team is a mobile development studio, and they more or less specialize in these style of low quality trash games. And I suspect, given the fact that they're asking this, is that they're not truly asking if we want to do this, but instead trying to ease us into the transition from what we actually are playing that's quite good into whatever this is supposed to be. So I'm very much against this change. As an aside, just before this information was released, our good friend Bitbender dumped his Village of the Earl for a fraction of the price of the market assets, which is kind of a trend that we've been seeing up to this point when it comes to Bitbender. So I suspect, based on these criteria and what we're seeing here, is that this is where Mirandus is likely going. Cheaper development, faster development, easier for the team, and in general just a far inferior product. Now here we have a video of me fighting some deers in kind of rapid succession. You can see I have a little fan on that one due to lag, but we're experiencing a pretty quick, and this is usually kind of the rate that I take over mobs when I'm playing. Now in this next video I'm kind of showing off the long range potential, and if you're on like a smartphone you might find this difficult to see, but I'm actually single shotting all of these deer at like super long range here. And hitting a single shot like this isn't particularly easy. Hitting 5 in a row like this is rather impressive, to say the least. So there we go. Now in this video we're showing off in quotes some PvP. Next video we're just showing off kind of some more of a stealthy approach, and this will be important with some of the exemplars, such as like Mumsens. And you can see I really go point blank range on some of these if you can sneak up right behind them, because their aggro is based on sound, and it's also based on what they can see. So if you sneak up on them quick without aggroing the others, then you can literally get these point blank shots in. And you hear the nice thud when they land too, which is satisfying. Between the sound of them thudding and the sound of looting material with a kind of like chiching sound, it's it's quite satisfying. The impacts from the arrows tend to be fairly impactful too. You really feel the arrow and the sound of the impact. And you can see here I'm kind of rushing around to get some of these more targets. And after you get all the kills in, you typically go back and do some looting. So I'll typically loot the last one I'm doing, and then I'll go back. And here you can see I'm looting, and as you can see here, there's a lot of materials. And what I've been doing is filling up each exemplar to the max out, and then kind of continuing on from that point. As you can see, this is a bunch of different screenshots combined showing 15, 30, 45, 60, and 75 test materium. And this test materium is all based off of buck kills. And they come in different ranges. So for example, getting materium to drop at all is about a 40% chance. And that would be the most common one, would be the 15 test materium. From there you have about a half chance less of getting 30 materium. Once you get up to 45 materium, it's kind of like maybe 1 in every 50 to 100 kills. 60 materium is like 1 in every few hundred kills. And the 75 test materium I only saw drop once in about 10,000 kills. Now if this follows anything with Gala Games, they likely have the, in quotes, ancient equivalent as well. And who knows what that is, maybe 1 in 25,000 kills or something. Now the interesting thing is this doesn't just apply to materium drops, and it does apply to all mobs, but it also applies to item drops. So let's say the buck drops some steel bars, and let's say they drop 1 steel bar. Well, the steel bars also follow this structure up to 5 steel bars at a time, and I've only seen a few times in all the kills I've gotten that 5 steel bars have dropped. So yeah, it's a very interesting system the way they have it working, and once these drops are converted to more relevant drops, because obviously deer shouldn't be dropping refined steel bars and such, but it does provide for some very rare drop potentials, and rare items tend to be very, very good for economies. So I'm interested to see how deep this goes, and I took quite a bit of time to try to test out these drops. Next up, we have a little video showing how the exemplars are affected in terms of height, and there is a difference between exemplars, as we'll see here. There you go. Okay. I think you might have to jump up on this front part first, and then jump in from there. There you go. Yeah. Ah, I can't. See, I'm too tall. This next section here is a bunch of showcasing of various bugs that are in the game with regards to bow positioning. Now, the last playtest only had human exemplars, and the human exemplars have the new model, and it's the only exemplar that have the newer models in this current build. And on the all the other exemplars, like the halfling, the elf, the dwarf, and the orc, for the most part are having issues with positioning because they're old designs. So on the left you see the bow is drawn properly with the actual bow shaft in a vertical position, but on the right side you're seeing the bugged version where you're actually holding the bow backwards and you're using the side of the actual shaft instead of shooting off of the string of the bow, and the bow is in kind of a horizontal position. And that's really annoying because the actual bow shaft tends to be right in the middle of your cursor, and it's hard to see what you're shooting at. Now, with enough practice and experience, that's not so much of an issue, but it's still a bug, and hopefully the new models of the orc, halfling, dwarf, and elf will improve this issue. In this screenshot, what we're seeing here is related to the same thing of different models having different stats, and the humans who are using the new models also are using the new versions of the armor, and the new versions of the armor are essentially 3 times stronger than the versions of the armor for every other race. So in this current build, humans are far more powerful than the other races because they take a tiny fraction of the damage damage. And the way that it works in Mirandus with regards to damage is that damage is based on absolute values. So for example, if Mother attacks you with 50 damage and you get a proc from your armor of 54 total defense, then you don't take any damage from Mother. So not alone are their defense values 3 times as strong, but their effective tanking or survival capabilities is multiples more than that. So we're talking maybe like a 5 times additional survivability over all the other races. And I do expect that this gets corrected once all the other models get updated, but it's an interesting thing to note at this point in time. In this image here, we're showing kind of the overrun of Vox, and this is something incredibly annoying. So every time you change zones or log in or log out, all of your empty inventory spots that could potentially fit a Vox get filled with Voxes. And you can't actually do anything until you delete all of those. And if you have a lot of Vox, it's a real effort and process to actually get rid of them all. The other thing is, if you notice in the bottom right, it says only 5 Materium, and that's another bug, because someone with this many arrows and items and stuff isn't going to have way more than 5 Materium. Actually, this character had about 45,000 Materium. But there's a bug where if the zone bugs out while you're playing, there's a chance your Materium goes to 0. Now, interestingly enough, I had this happen on another character, and the Materium went to 0 only on that character, but instead the Materium appeared in full on another character that I didn't play with before. So there's obviously some sort of interesting database issue or something going on here. I don't know all the details of how this works, but if you've been playing and you've noticed your Materium's gone to 0 and you have other exemplars, it would be worthwhile to check those other exemplars and see if your Materium has potentially transitioned over to one of those. Now in this video here, I'm just showcasing how the torches are working. So you see here the torch, you can't see it, it's backwards. Now I'm going to reapply the torch so that you can see it correctly, and here we go. So the torch normally is right in your face, which is incredibly annoying. And that's an issue. It's actually worth looting to put it backwards. The bug is better than the working torch. Now this here you see disconnected waiting for a connection. This is something you're going to experience a lot, like very, very frequently. And there's not much you can do with that other than simply retrying. And sometimes you have to close the program out and restart back in, etc., etc. So a common issue. Next is the server down for maintenance. Now this here is something you're going to experience every 3 hours, and it always happens 10 minutes after the hour of the reset. Usually it's down for about 10 minutes as well, and this here kind of clears up all of the random arrows that are stuck in things around the map. If the mobs are bugged or anything, this resets them. So annoying when you're playing to have this happen, but it does give you a 10-minute countdown so you know exactly when it's going to happen, and it does make for much smoother gameplay. So a worthwhile issue. Now a previous playtest that had this same sort of server maintenance was set on the hour, and that was because of a memory leak. Now I don't know if the memory leak persists at this time because the server automatically resets every 3 hours, so you never get to the point where the potential memory leak rears its ugly head. Now this here is one of the most common bugs, and if this happens, it's a real nuisance because the whole zone is empty. And it gets to the point where there's no mobs that spawn, and there's nothing that you can loot, so the pine trees don't spawn, etc. Now this bug typically happens after the loot bug. So what happens is you're playing along and then the whole zone bugs out so that all the mobs are standing still and you can't loot them. After that happens, then you have to wait until the 3-hour period to the server resets. Once the server resets, you tend to get this bug, and it takes another 3 hours until the next server reset before it gets to the point where all the mobs spawn again. So if you're unlucky enough to have the loot bug occur just after a server reset, you're talking a good 6 hours where you literally can't really do anything at all. And I've had this happen multiple times at this point, so it's a major issue, and they really need to correct it. Now what we're seeing here is me kind of just going through the whole zone with no mobs in it, and this particular area here is the area with the wolves. And that front area they changed from the last playtest such that there's many more wolves at the entrance, which makes it harder for you to get up on the rocks to make it deeper into the zone without killing the wolves first. This also was the area that you used to go to kill the golden rabbit in the last playtest, which was a interesting experience to say the least. Now it's more of kind of a nuisance area and not particularly efficient because there's a bunch of wolves that can kill you from long range, and their drop rates are not particularly better than the bucks. And the bucks only take a single sharp arrow to kill, whereas the wolves take 2 sharp arrows. So if you're looking to get drops in Materium, hunting the bucks is by far your best bet in terms of time savings and in terms of drops, and it's also much easier as well. So there's just really no reason to fight the wolves. And you saw there I kind of ran out of stamina, so I had to eat. So yeah, this is just to kind of show off this bug here. Now, in terms of final thoughts, I'll say the first one mentioning with the big news, the fact that they could be in converting from a fully immersive 3D first-person world with very good combat mechanics to your typical cheap mobile game over-the-top isometric view, which is similar to games like Diablo and such, but with much lower quality. And a personal perspective, I absolutely despise click-to-move games, as in I absolutely refuse to play them whatsoever. So the fact that they're potentially doing that with Mirandus makes me a little unhappy, to say the least. Now, in terms of this launch, I'm a little surprised that they only launched this zone. And on a previous video, my launch video, I showed all the potential zones that they would likely launch with. And I'm a little surprised that they only did this one, especially when they have the other zones complete and they have dungeons within those zones almost complete as well. I'm not sure their angle was with releasing this build. I do know back earlier this year with the old Mirandus team, they initially planned to release this zone as a test and then repeat it again with real Materium. So it's quite possible, if they're following that same pattern, that this playtest Materium might actually be real Materium. So even though it says in your inventory test Materium, the game doesn't really seem to differentiate between real Materium and test Materium. And the zones do have limited amounts. Like typically a zone has 100,000 Materium per zone. This zone, for the purposes at the present, has more than that because it's the only zone. Now, going forward, if it follows the schedule of the previously planned from the old Mirandus team, the next zone should be King's March, and that zone should have full active Materium being able to be used, and you'll need it for things such as crafting gear, and the items you drop you should be able to sell to the vendors for Materium as well. Now, when the game is actually 100% released, such as having player deeds and buildings in place, the players will be the people trading and accepting Materium instead of the game itself. So what do we have going forward? Well, there's a lot of unknowns, to say the least. I've been enjoying playing this build just because I really like the game and I have significant skin in the game. I don't think the average person would really find this build worth playing at the present. To end it off, when the new zones come out, which should be sometime in the month of December, I will make detailed guides on how to play those specific zones and any strategies and everything else. And then I'll make an update, kind of review on how things are changing and any other things. So if you're interested in Mirandus, you can certainly keep tuned, and I guarantee this will provide you with the best information that's available within the Mirandus ecosystem. Okay, thanks, and have a good day.